Okay, so I've rendered out of Modo just a Chrome layer, and what I want to do is start trying to modify and come up with a couple of different materials. So I'm just going to treat this as my clear coat layer, and then we're going to re-render part of this and change the materials. And then this will be how we'll render materials in Photoshop. So we'll first do this with basically no photo reference. We're starting with this, of course, as our clear coat, but I'm not going to pull up carbon fiber or anything to look at, so we'll see if we can just create something in Photoshop based on what we just observed in Modo. So I'm going to start by making a path layer. I'm going to grab the pen tool and start to pick out this shape. And I just want to pull my Chrome layer off of here. Let's see, let's do like this. And let's just go back up this cut line right here. Well, it's not a cut line, but this graphic. We'll use that as our spot where we're going to stop. Okay, then I want to zoom in here and refine that shape. Get it a little bit cleaner. And let's stop just at the left side of that white line. Okay, almost looking good there. Tighten that up a bit. It doesn't have to be exact, as this is just a study and a demo to again explain the physics. No avoiding it. Doing reflective surfaces is all about those physics. Okay, got it there. Pretty close there. This looks to be a bit long. Needs to be a little flatter. Okay, that. Maybe one more spot to fix up. You can see my alpha poly model here where I put those cut lines in. Unfortunately, it makes the surface do some nasty things. See my reflection through here. Normally, it'd be a nice sweeping curve through there. Now it's got all broken up because of that surface variation. And that again just shows how subtle and sensitive reflections are to form change. Okay, so let's make our new layer and let's just fill that. And we'll start out with like a base gray here. Now I know what the sections are, so I know where the core shadow should go. I know the light's up over here to my left, shining down, and that's why I'm able to get that sun reflection there. So let's first just review matte surface rendering. So matte surface rendering, let's see, let's start with this. And so if that was going to be my core shadow and halfway to black, that means my bright could be almost all the way up to white. So I'm going to grab a nice big airbrush, and it's going to be lighter across the top here, and leaving a core shadow. I'm going to get some nice reflected light in here. Get a little bit less where I've got this, and probably, if I'm going to get a little more accurate, I probably should get some blue into this thing. And whatever color that is for my reflected light. So I'm just thinking of those sections I had, dropping in the core shadow. Alright, so probably right through there somewhere. is the core, and maybe that reflected light's a little too strong. All right, that generally works. And this probably has a little bit darker where that section changes, and then bright across the top. Okay, so that could be my matte surface. Could probably stretch that gradation just a bit up into the light side to try to show that form. Okay, now if I wanted, let's take this and let's duplicate and go up top. And like we've done before with a couple of other examples, if I was going to try and make that material underneath reflective, all I need to do is throw pure chrome on top, grab a layer mask, and introduce the Fresnel, which would be, you know, somewhere through here. Less shiny and rolling away. As it rolls away, makes it more like chrome. And probably a little less right through here. So basically this is just going to be my clear coat that I'm going to put over whatever material I choose to render underneath. And maybe I'll change the value of this now. Let's make it something a bit darker. Increase the contrast just a tick. Okay, if I want to go like shiny black, would look something like that. So I just want it to go a bit darker. All right, now if this was going to be wood or something, we could pull some wood in there, throw it on there and wrap it. I'm going to see if I can get some carbon fiber working. So let me dig and see if, pause the video for a moment and see if I can find a nice texture to use. Okay, so what I've done is I have brought over a couple of materials. So I just made this using fill and pattern, and I found this pattern inside Photoshop. It's just a weave, and then what I did is I darkened it down, and I made it so it repeats. So just like a little swatch, and then I think I repeated it vertically 3 times, and then flattened those together and 3 times to the left to make a big swatch that we could warp across there. So first thing we need are to know the sections of our shape. So had I done this line drawing, I would know those. So I put those on that rendering so it would work just like section lines for a line drawing. So let me just draw those so that we have something we can see to reference when we warp our materials across the shape. And of course I need to add back my cut line, and let's see up here, that's the curvature at the silhouette. Okay, so I've got those, and I'll just float those on top. So when we start to warp this, I can actually see how that's going to drape and wrap across the surface. So really, let's see, let's throw this also at the very top, turn it off. You can already see, just if it was flat, right, even if I didn't even warp it, it already has an interesting texture, and I have the reflections blending, and it's already starting to work. But that's not quite accurate. So what I like to do is turn that off, look at my section lines, go back to this, and a lot of times if I have a nice flat swatch, I like to save those for future. So a lot of times I will copy that and maybe put it into a separate file and then warp this one. And in case I screw it up, it's hard to get back to that original form. So let's just go to warp, and what I want to do is warp my pattern to match my section lines. I don't think we probably need to worry about that little change up there, but let's try and get this to start to wrap a little bit better. Now it shouldn't really be shrinking when it gets up here to the front, so it really just needs to wrap. And somewhere there's going to be a seam on it because it is a piece of fabric. So really you just want to start to get the foreshortening to work and get that to wrap. Okay, and you don't really have to worry much about the silhouette out here, and the reason for that is that the chrome, the reflectivity is going to take over, right, and it's going to hide that. So here I'm shrinking it a little bit too much. It's more bending. It would foreshorten around there, so let's try to get the foreshortening as it wraps away. So I'm just going to take this one and throw it and try to match that curvature. Looks like this needs to come up quite a bit. So I'm just using those guidelines in the warp tool to match my section lines that I have for my drawing, my fake drawing in this case. But if you had drawn it XYZ shape like lesson 5 I think it was, then you'd have all this there. So, and then, you know, if we want to try and foreshorten a little bit as it wraps away towards the top and as it wraps under here, because of the perspective, we would expect to see some foreshortening. So just keep nudging that around, okay, until it starts to look like it's wrapping on our shape. Starting to work. Okay, and you don't have to be super precise, because even if it is fabric, you can actually skew it when you're laying down carbon fiber, and you could have actually waves of the fiber running through here. It doesn't look that nice, but it definitely happens sometimes. And if you wanted to get really precise, you could go up there and also warp that a little bit more, but I think that's going to work well enough for what we're doing. I'm going to run it long just a little bit so that it covers completely. All right, looks pretty decent. I'm going to commit to that by hitting return. All right, now what I want to do is have it map to my shape underneath. So if I just make it a clipping path layer, okay, by hitting the Option or Alt button, when it crosses over, now it's going to wrap exactly to the shape underneath. But the form doesn't work yet, right? And remember, we have to reflect the weave wherever we have the sun. So we know the sun's going to be here and here. So those are the two areas. Probably should make a new layer at the top. We'll call this sun. Okay, and there I'm going to, let's get rid of my weave. I'm going to re-render those highlights on a separate layer. So let's grab an airbrush. Let's just make them a little bit warm. Okay, now I could just take my airbrush. The easiest thing probably is to take my, where do my brushes go? Brush presets. No, not that one. I want the other one. Brush. There we go. So squeeze that. Now, of course, it's a lot easier because I have this rendering that we've already done, but you know it should be squeezed some amount. So we'll just say something like that. Okay, and then we've got this guy up here, which is kind of starting to squeeze it as well. It's a little bit of an odd shape, but we'll just do something like that. Or it repeats on this radius and on that radius. And didn't quite get back to repeating in the fillet. That's why it was starting to bend. It was starting to repeat down in this fillet right here, and it was up on the radius. So you could have, we were pretty close to getting two suns there and there. And so it's kind of in between, and that's why it's starting to stretch that, and you can see it hinting at wrapping back around. So let me erase that mess I just made. And so I'm going to just simplify and just keep it up on the radius. So something like that. Okay, so we have our sun. Now we need to get our gradation, our matte surface gradation put into this. This is where we're going to try and get that color dodged up to get some of the weave to show. So you could experiment with how to do that. You could say, well, what if we just took my shading layer and put it on top, and let's have these clip back. And what if I just put that on multiply? Would that start to do enough? Yeah, not bad. Starts to help a bit. So I'm just taking my value scale for my matte surface, right, and I'm just throwing it on top and putting it on multiply. Not a bad start. If we want that to go even stronger, remember we barely saw any in the any of the weave in the Moto example, so we could take that way down if you wanted, have it be very, very subtle. Okay, and then what about getting our reflection of the weave itself, the little spots of the fabric overlapping? Well, I think a good way to do that might be to dodge this layer. So in case I screw up, make a copy of that, and let's just put it on top for now. And let's just try and see if we can get those hot spots to show up. So what I might try to do in this case is use the actual dodge tool, because I can set it to highlights. And I really want just the highlights. I really want just those squares to pop a little bit. So I'm going to put this here, and let's see, dodge tool, exposure, I turn it down quite a bit because it tends to go pretty fast, and see if I can just pull up those little bright squares just where the sun is shining. Right, it's kind of like metallic in that way. It's going a bit extreme. It's all right though. We can blend that back and only keep the part that we want. And let's make that even a bit stronger. Let's see if that works. So I would probably put that on something like screen, would keep just the white and make all the black disappear. So if you wanted to, you could do something like this and then increase its contrast. So you're keeping just that reflection of the weave. So by pulling the midpoints up, now it's black and white almost. And we're just keeping that reflecting through there. Looks a little strong for me, but it's all right. We'll play around with it some more. Let's see. So let's see if it's, yeah, screen should just keep the white. Yep, so see there, I just have the white showing up. That's on this layer on the top. And then we can have our base color. And if we had our actual weave turned back on, and then we darkened it up with that multiply layer, and then we can change the opacity of that. That's one way to do it. You know, that's not too bad somewhere in there. And then we have our reflection layer over the top. So not a bad, quick and dirty way to do carbon fiber. And of course you could change the size of the weave, etc. Let me just run my cut line back in here and make a new layer. Let's call this cut line. Let me just quickly throw a path on there so that we can get back that cut through the reflection. Especially help us when we do a couple of these other materials that are coming next. Let's see, I think it goes somewhere through here. I'm just going to take a guess for now, and then I've got to turn off some layers so I can see a little bit better. So let's turn that off. Let's just go back to here. Okay, white arrow. Let's pull this through. See if I can get this shape to be a bit more accurate. And we're going to want to then run this cut line through our matte surface. Not bad. Okay, and then just run it out there. That looks all pretty decent. I could use a little more curve there. It's got a weird little wobble there. My surface isn't that great. And up. Okay, that will probably work. So just cut line. I'm going to go to I have a little cut liner brush here, which is just a little 3 pixel. Let's just make it black. Probably looks like it could be a little bit fatter. Make it like 6. And stroke that path. Oh, that's too fat. Let's make it smaller. That's a little bit better. All right, and we could actually just float that above. Well, just have a black cut line cutting through our reflection would be nice. So there we've got that going through our matte surface. We could, of course, pick up a little highlight in a couple of spots, but generally it's right below the core shadow, so I don't think we'll get anything happening down there. And if we wanted to add that to our mask, we don't really need to because it's just going over the top, so that's fine. Yeah, base color, that's if it was a glossy gray. We'd have something like that. Let's turn on our carbon fiber weave, which we warped. And I have a little cut line going through it as well. And then we had some shading on that. Okay, I just used my matte surface shading just to darken it down, really. And even that, I think we could even make the weave even less apparent. And then there was our little glow, and that's a layer I put on top. Remember, we color dodged, and I just have it set to screen. And you can pull that up, of course, if you really want to push it more, but that looks a little bit fake. So I'm just keeping it pretty subtle, something like that, just to make that weave pop a little bit. And then I've got my reflection layer. So that's really a pretty decent carbon fiber. Let's try another material. Okay, let's turn off our reflection. Let's group. Let's see, I think I'm going to make one of these. Again, I'm going to copy that and put it on top. Okay, and I'm then going to reestablish my clipping path layers and group all of those. I'm going to make a new group for you here called carbon. So there we go, we have all the carbon fiber in one layer now, so you can refer to that. All right, that's our carbon fiber swatch. Why don't I drop that inside here as well? I'll just leave it off. Okay, now let's try some marble. So we want to go through the same routine. I want to turn on my section lines so I can see them. I want to take my marble and I'm going to warp that again. And what I really want you to see this lesson is that no matter what you do with the base material, the clear coat and the reflections remain the same. And that's really the key to freeing you up to create your own materials and do fake looking, fake meaning, our fake carbon fiber, etc. But you can do all that with your own layering system, right, inside Photoshop, just understanding the physics. So what I'm trying to do here is just get that texture to foreshorten as it wraps around that surface. This doesn't wrap like carbon fiber, right? This would be solid and sculpted, but you would still see an influence of the perspective and of the shape compressing the texture as it wraps, whereas the shape, modified it by being sculpted out of that material. So I'm going to do that. Turn off my sections. I'm going to copy this guy again. I'm going to throw it here, and let's just colorize this. So I'm going to go here, Command U, and I'm going to colorize my matte layer, and I want to colorize it towards that. So let's get something a little bit closer like this, maybe a little less saturation. And then let's change its values a little bit because I don't want it to add that much when we set it to multiply. And I'm going to have it multiply, and that's going to add the gradation to our marble layer. And let's put it on, whoops, I need to have a base one of these in order to put this on. Or you know what we could do? We could just load this selection, right? And then I can just go here and delete. Command Shift I to invert it, and then delete. And now they share the same silhouette. Okay, and the cut line, if this was going to be my cut line on the marble, of course, then I would say, well, black is too strong. I would take that, double it up, and let's put it here. Hit Preserve Transparency, grab an airbrush, and I would go to this kind of darker brown. Still not quite dark enough. Just to knock it back a bit. Okay, and then of course if you wanted to catch a little edge, you know, here or there, you could always double that and go to the one underneath, and let's just drop it a bit and move it. Preserve Transparency is on. Go back here, let's pick the lighter value, probably something about like this, and just have it catch a little bit of an edge through there. And then what you can do, of course, is turn off Preserve Transparency and then erase it where, or use Layer Mask. Maybe you just throw a Layer Mask on there and start to hide it. Like here it goes below the core shadow, right? So we just start to catch a little bit of light right before it disappears into there, and a little bit up top there. Maybe not so much right through here where it's vertical. So a little bit of lighting to give it a little dimension. And then again, our reflection over the top. And so depending how, now let's start to modify this one. Let's try to make this marble semi-gloss instead of really shiny. And ignore my section lines, the white, you know, it's coming from my chrome layer, but that's fine for this demo. So let's go to this layer. Let's do Filter, Blur. Let's put a little Gaussian blur on it. Okay, so that's really softening my reflection now. See, look at the stripe through here and the horizon line. Okay, so we'll do something about like that. And what isn't working, of course, is the blurring that is happening of all the rest of it. So what I want to do is let's just pull the chrome only. So I know I have, this is the proper selection shape, so I could do that, and I could go here and Command Shift I again and delete. Okay, and now we have the hard, strong photographic environment with our softer reflection. And remember when we looked at the semi-gloss in Modo that we also saw a strong reflection of the light on the semi-gloss right where the sun was reflecting. So I could go here, add a new layer, double click that, here, turn those off, put it on color dodge, and I'm going to influence the layers below it, and I just want to go grab a soft airbrush, and you could go in here and pick that color of the sun, and I want it to also not go past this line, but I want to come back in here and try to, let's turn that off so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, sorry. This is set to multiply, so when you do that, it doesn't work. So what we'll do is we'll just come back and clean up that edge if we need it. So let me erase that and start over. Sorry, you can't composite that color dodge layer over a multiply layer, meaning you can't use the clipping path. So we'll just load the selection and delete the silhouette when we're done. Okay, so that's why it was looking awful. So let's push that like we saw on our semi-gloss. It's probably a little bit too saturated and a little too strong. But let's get close first, then we'll worry about finessing it. Okay, something like that. And now let's see if I can change the saturation a bit. It's a bit too strong. And also maybe change the opacity. So that's why I was using like a 20% airbrush, because it really goes very, very fast, a color dodge layer. You could also try screen or something too. Let's see what happens if I put it on screen. Yeah, it looks a little bit dead. Not quite bright enough, but you could maybe say, well, let's use screen mostly, then let's double this, and let's put that one on color dodge. Let's make sure it's set, yeah, set the right way, and then let's turn it way down, just to give us a little bit of color in there. So personal preference, and if you've pulled a nice piece of photo reference, you can use that to help gauge. I'm going to go, I think, just with the color dodge. I'm a car guy, so I like a lot of that color and glow. So we'll do that, and this is for our marble set. And then I would have our blurry reflection. So let's take that down here. I'll make a new group for you. Now you also have to cut out your cut lines. So you could either put your cut line over the top of your reflection, except you can't do it with the color, right? So it's really technically underneath. So maybe what we can do is just go here, load that selection, go to our chrome layer, and then delete our reflection layer. So that's where we're starting to get our soft fuzzy reflection. I probably change the opacity a bit, knock it down even more, right, a little more see-through to go semi-gloss, something like that. Or you could go here and adjust your Fresnel and let it only have the Fresnel right out at the silhouette. So let's go here and go back to my big airbrush, and I'm going to paint in there to soften and lessen that Fresnel effect. So very, very soft, almost invisible reflection of our environment. Something like that. That's probably a little bit closer to what we saw in our rendering examples. So that'd be like a semi-gloss marble. So let's take and group that. And let's call it semi-gloss marble. Okay, and I brought in some wood. So we've got something like that. And you know what the routine is going to be now. It's going to be exactly what it's been. And what do we have here? Bronze, it kind of looks like distressed leather as well, so we could wrap that on there, or we could wrap this wood. So maybe let's just put a panel on here. Let's just take that swatch and let's modify it a little bit. And this is going to be like somebody had some thin sheets of wood, and they're going to just wrap those like they were like a veneer, and it was just bent across the surface. So I'm going to come in here, I'm just going to notch out, get rid of some of this extra. Okay, so I'm going to treat like that's thin veneer, and we want to wrap it. I'll turn back on the section lines, and I'm going to shrink its size, and that works. And then let's do our warp again, trying to get that to line up with my sections. have it foreshorten a bit as it rolls under, so that means just fattening up the middle. Maybe not that much. Okay, keep tweaking that, looking up here at this section. So this would be like a wood inlay that somebody put on the side of this shape. And let's have that cross our horizon reflection just a tick. Okay, so it's about getting those sections correct. That looks a bit odd right there. And straighten that up. Okay, almost got it. Pretty close. All right, let's call that good. And let's put it with, what do we want to put that with? We could put it with our marble. Let's go down here. And let's just add it into that stack. And then that would be inlaid right into the same surface. And all the reflections, could all remain the same. We could also take that away and hide that guy. And of course it could go with our carbon fiber. And it would still work. We'd still have all the same reflections over the top. So you get the idea. You can change the base coat to anything you want. And then by modifying or keeping your reflections, I should say, the same over the top of it, it all works. So super liberating and fun to go back in, play with different materials in your base coat, keep your clear coat over the top the same, and then adjust it. Opacities, adjusting your layers. Do you want it to be super shiny? Of course we can do that. We can double that up. We can change the layer mask, increasing our Fresnel. We can pop this hotspot even more. You can do all that stuff and have the freedom to do that. You can blur your reflection, making something semi-glass instead of carbon fiber.